felt when you saw the protests happening in Hong Kong in 2014 and 2019, especially 2019 when there were, millions of Hong Kongers marching through the streets?
Well, we once had a demonstration when I was governor of Hong Kong, and 2,000 people turned up when the unemployment rate went up by above 2%. That was the only demonstration I can remember. There was a demonstration when I arrived in Hong Kong because there was a strike on Cathay Pacific Airline, and a group of air hostesses and others turned up at the gates of Government House in Hong Kong. And people said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I'll go out and talk to them. And they said, you can't possibly talk to them. They're on strike. And I said, well, I'm governor. It's part of my job. But that was the nearest we'd ever come to any sort of demonstration. So the demonstrations in 2019 in particular were pretty mind-blowing. And they had consequences for the Hong Kong diaspora and Hong Kong students, which were very worrying, because I didn't feel I could ever give people the assurances that they wanted. I'll tell you a story. I was taking my dog for a walk in a local park near where I live in London. And I turned a corner. There was a group of young Chinese, about 5 of them, 6, young men and women, all probably in their early to mid-20s. And one of them came up to me and they called me by my nickname in Hong Kong. Bang Ting Hong, one of them said. So he came over to me and he said, do you remember me? Well, I did that politician's thing of sort of waffling. And he said, you don't, do you? In fact, he said, we got our photograph taken together when you spoke to about 400 or 500 Chinese students in Oxford. And you had your photograph taken with me holding a yellow umbrella, which you remember was
the
symbol, which they had in order to ward off the fumes of tear gas. So I waffled a bit at least. And he said, look, he said, I've just finished my DPhil. I've done my dissertation on diabetes, and I'm hoping to practice in a hospital. He said, and my 2 friends and my girlfriend have all just finished their medical degrees. We've all just become doctors. And he said to me, my girlfriend said to me, if we see Chris Patten, if we see the chancellor of the university, I want to ask him one question. So I said, well, go ahead. And she said, we've all finished our professional qualifications. Should we go back to Hong Kong? And there was no way I waffled. There was no way I could really answer that question. Here were very bright young people, important professional careers ahead of them. What would I say to my own children? What sort of assurances could I give them? And in the end, I was resorted to the sort of quasi-sentimental, portentous statements about freedom always outlasting tyranny and all that, which is true. But if you're trying to work out whether you're going to be a consultant at a hospital in America or Canada or Britain or go back to Hong Kong. So I've always had that real sense of concern that I can't give people whom I like inordinately and respect inordinately. I can't give the sort of assurances which I'd love to be able to give, because I'd be lying. So I hope one day I'll be able to say that with some optimism. But I'm 80 now, and I'm not sure whether I'll live that long. Don't want to sound morbid, but it's just a reality. So it's been such an important part of my life. Not the most difficult job I've ever had, but certainly the most enjoyable and the one which had most effect on people. I loved Hong Kong. Still love Hong Kong. I can't go there anymore because government wouldn't let me. And I still see quite a lot of members of the Hong Kong diaspora in Britain. There's probably 150,000, pretty much, as I said earlier. And they're lovely and enthusiastic and ebullient. And went back to my old school recently, and the new chemistry master was from Hong Kong. I went to speak at one of my grandson's schools, and 3 teachers came up to me who were all from Hong Kong. And it's sad. I mean, good for Britain, but it's really sad to see the way a pretty brutal, authoritarian, totalitarian system can crush a free society. And what is also depressing is how some people who are still making money there manage to find excuses or for reasons for not belonging or not believing what's happening. There was a guy who was a friend of mine, he and his wife. He used to describe himself when I was in Hong Kong, very rich lawyer. He used to call himself the only member of the Labour Party paid up in Hong Kong. In other words, he wanted to be seen to be associated with moderate left-wing causes. He was a tremendous philanthropist, funded the jazz club, very good with other artistic endeavors in keeping them going. And we were having lunch, maybe it's 5 or 6 years ago, with him and another friend of mine, Jonathan Dimbleby, who wrote my biography. And he said, Jonathan said to me, why don't you tell him what you think is happening in Hong Kong? So I went through all the ways in which I thought the rule of law was being undermined. He's a lawyer, this guy. And he said, I didn't know about that. And then we quickly changed the subject. But 5 minutes later, he said, I didn't tell you, did I? I've got the most wonderful new boat. And it made you realize that how loud money speaks.